Good afternoon, Suidlanders. I'm trying a new thing here, and it's disorienting me. Putting the monitor for the camera on this screen here rather than right in front of me. So again, slightly disoriented, but trying. Good afternoon, Suidlanders. How are you? We trust that you're well. This is Suidlanders Week in Review for the week ending Friday the 25th of November 2022. So what have we got for you today? Going back to last week, Saturday, Sunday period. Well, we know all about the Eskom story. We know that it broke last week. We discussed it a little bit last week. We've discussed it again this week. The latest on the story is, and the media seem to be accepting this as if it's, the story ends there. A man cut his leg deeply. He went to the doctor fixed it up. Whereas it's not like that at all. Pravin Gordhan has said that the strategic fuel reserve can provide Eskom with 50 million litres of fuel. There are two things to consider here. Somebody's got to pay for it, and the problem with diesel for the open cycle gas turbines was the budgeting, because in the 6 months from the 1st of April to, as I have it, the 30th of September, not the 30th of October, some reports contradict one another, but let's work on 6 months. Eskom had used double what it had budgeted for its year based upon last year. The thinking being that it couldn't possibly be worse than last year. So, if you use double in half the time, you're running at 400% more. The Eskom open cycle gas turbines have been working 400% harder than they did last year, which was supposed to have been a disaster of a year. And they ran out of money to buy more diesel. That's why they said they would shut them down. So the first problem is the who's going to pay for it. The second problem is, what are we going to do when those gas turbines are worked to death? When they are driven right into the ground, as the African National Congress drives everything into the ground until there's nothing left of it, and then they sit on their haunches with their heads in their hands and cry, woe is me. So, I think that this is not the last that we're going to hear of that drama. What next? I'm working my way through the list of things here. Oh, it was reported on Monday, Sunday or Monday, that at the G20 World Leaders, the G20 summit of last week, it turned out on Sunday or Monday that Bill Gates had said, he told the G20 world leaders that death panels will soon be required. Now, he didn't say that explicitly. Bill Gates has used his appearance at the G20 summit in Bali, Indonesia, to raise a discussion about death panels. According to Gates, death panels will be necessary in the near future in order to end the lives of sick and unwell people due to very, very high medical costs. Now, there were a clip then emerged of him talking about this stuff, and the point that he was making was, we're not supposed to talk about things like death panels. He said that explicitly at the end, but we may have to consider death panels that adjudicate whether or not somebody is allowed to spend, say, $1 million for 3 months of life to keep themselves alive, or their last 3 months, or whether that money shouldn't go to keeping 10 teachers employed, for instance. Now, besides the crass immorality of the thing, you have to consider that this is an American talking largely, not only, but largely to audiences, to an audience whose members represent people whose health insurance or whose medical costs are covered by private health insurance. Not only, in fact, it may be a relatively small minority, but if it's just the people of the USA and Canada, for instance, roughly, and other places like South Africa where private health insurance is what wealthier people rely upon. The question is, how preposterous is it, the suggestion that you may invest in private health insurance for 40 years of your working life, and then at the end, along comes the death panel and says, well, you're not allowed to utilize that insurance policy in this manner, to this extent. You're not allowed to take advantage, a million rand or $1 million for 3 different heart-lung machines, what, when clearly you're going to die in a short period of time. And where do you draw that line? Do you draw the line at $1 million or 100,000 rand? So in other words, you're in a hospice at say 30,000 rand a month. Is that too much? Are you being too indulged, too spoiled? Is it too unfair that you're able to get that sort of care and somebody down the road in a squatter camp, their quality of life is not even amounts to 3,000 rand a month's worth of material comfort? So it's a very big thing, and I put it to you that it's coming. Right, what else did we have? We had North Korea test firing an intercontinental ballistic missile of enough range to strike the entire USA. North Korea, of course, and the USA, North Korea, Vietnam, Japan, Taiwan, China, are separated from the USA by the Pacific Ocean. So what they're saying is that this North Korean missile can fly all the way from North Korea on the Pacific coast, in the far north of the Pacific, right at the top of China. It's a neighbor of China's in the far north, all the way from there across the Pacific, over the west coast of the USA, Washington State, Oregon State, and California, right across to the east coast. So a missile of prodigious range, and that was quite a big thing certainly in Western, in Northern Hemisphere media at the beginning of this week. And then, of course, as many of you will know, we were all astonished to discover, hey, who knew, that there are now open conversations being held in Canada between, for instance, this is one example, if I can remember the title correctly, the Ontario College of Physicians and Surgeons and the doctors of Ontario, in which they're saying, that is to say that the College of Physicians and Surgeons is saying to the doctors in writing, look, you may have to consider giving psychiatric medication to people who still refuse to take the injection. Let me not say any more than that. You know the reasons why. The next thing we discovered, the Supreme Court of Appeal said that Zuma must go back to jail and that his medical parole was simply unlawful. Now that's a very, very big thing. How it's going to transpire, I don't know. let's not speculate too much. So far, we're not hearing much inside information. We've heard about the DA saying that they've written to, I think, the Directorate of Public Prosecutions or the police, somebody, saying that Zuma must be in by 5 o'clock. And the time now is 6 minutes past 4 on Friday, the 25th of November, 2022. So I think that one thing's reasonably certain. He's not going to be in 54 minutes time. But we'll see. We'll see how that turns out. Then we got the news that that was the next day, Tuesday, that apparently the clever minds, the sleuths, the Sherlock Holmeses involved or observing or cropping in the FTX crypto scandal had discovered that, I can't even really explain it to you, so if I get it wrong, please be patient with me. It's quite complicated. These guys gave lots and lots of money to the Democratic Party. Somehow, there's a connection between that money and support for Ukraine, and there is a suggestion, it may be false, but there is a suggestion that that money was employed in some very shady dealings, including in the dealings of people known for child prostitution. I don't know how bad this thing is, how deep it runs, but it's looking pretty evil. And I'm sure that you, like I, do not wish Mr. Samuel Schmiel Bankman-Friedman, very much good health in the rest of his life. Right, and then of course we got on the 21st of November, which I believe was also Tuesday, 25, 24, 23, 22, no, on Monday, the movie by Stu Peters called Died Suddenly was released. I must confess I haven't watched it yet. I haven't had the time. I've got a backlog of about 60, 70 tabs on my computer, all sorts of things that I'm supposed to read and watch. So I'm very far behind. But the people whom I know who have watched it reckon that it is absolutely excellent. So if you haven't watched Died Suddenly yet, then search it on the internet. Search against Rumble, because it is on Rumble, rumble.com, and then search there, Died Suddenly. If you need another search term, use the search term Stu Peters. He's a guy many of you have seen, conservative guy. He produced, oh dear me, what is the correct title? Watch the Water? Was it called Watch the Water? With Dr. Brian Ardis. Anyway, you'll find it very easily. Apparently it's well worth a look. What else have we got? We had denial from Eskom that the viral message that you've all heard by now, purportedly coming out of some maybe mid to senior management at Old Mutual, so Eskom denied that it was true, but then we heard that you can't make this stuff up. One of the big insurance companies has informed its clients that it will not honor its insurance promise if the grid goes down. The point being that as the one party is laughing off the message, so too is another very big serious entity saying, we take it seriously enough to inform you as follows. We had Cyril Ramaphosa in London. That's not even worth talking about. It's really just a meme. It's not serious. It's neither here nor there. Petrol. On the 7th of December, you know, these petrol price increases and decreases occur on the first Wednesday of every month. The first Wednesday of December is the 7th of December. Petrol will increase in price by 75 cents a litre, and diesel will decrease in price by 92 cents a litre. So that's good news for some, bad news for others. A day for gun cleaning, says Zuma's daughter, Duduzile Zuma Sambodla, called for mob justice to take place when Janusz Walusz is released from prison. I have something to tell you on that. I was told by two different people years apart two things that added up to one tale. So I'm going to conflate the two, and I'm not going to tell you which one said what to me, so that we don't take too many chances with our safety. But let it suffice to say that the one person was very far left-wing, ANC member, and the other person was a former functionary in the nationalist government. Between the two of them, I was told this. At an ANC conference in, I believe, Zambia in December 1989, to the best of my recollection of the story. Chris Hani gave a speech in which he said, I hear that you're all talking about reconciliation and new South Africa and negotiations and peaceful transitions and what have you. I am telling you, as the head of Mkhonto Wesizwe, that shall not happen. It shall happen only over my dead body. We committed ourselves years ago to a national democratic revolution, a Russian-style revolution, a Leninist-style revolution, and I'm telling you, that is what's going to take place. And apparently, over time, the way it was explained to me was that many of the senior ANC people were elderly, and they wanted to see the promised land. They wanted to enter Canaan, so to speak. Please forgive the comparison. And they were willing to make concessions, and they were very willing to take big money for them. In other words, they were quite happy to sell their souls or sell their principles, however you'd like to put it. They just wanted to see the completion of the exercise. And between them and the National Party and various other entities, CIA, whatever, the Clintons, we know, we understand that, but let's speak in simple terms. Between them and the National Party, they were desperate. Both parties, these elderly ANC people and the National Party, both wanted the same thing, the less complications. Allegedly, Chris Hani didn't back down from his position. All the time he was quietly plotting, allegedly, a good and proper revolution with all of its attendant slaughter. And at some point, they agreed that he couldn't be allowed to continue to plot something other than what the old fogies of the ANC and what the National Party were trying to arrange. In other words, a fairly rapid and peaceful transition. The National Party, this was also explained to me, apparently had the upper hand in the negotiations from the point of view of time, Which is not to say that they had the upper hand in everything. There were universal sanctions, we all remember this. But they could slow down the process. Whereas the ANC was very anxious for it to happen now. We want to be in charge now. We want the money now. And therefore, the National Party was able to extract concessions that ideologues like Chris Hani were bitterly opposed to. And it became clear that he was capable of wrecking the entire process and that he was working hard at it. So they did a setup job to have him taken out. In much the same way as Israel set up the 19 hijackers of the 4 flights, if you believe that there were 4, that attacked on 911. We know from the dancing Israelis, and if you don't know about this, go and look it up. It's the most convincing, persuasive thing you'll ever discover. Not least because the dancing Israelis admitted it on Israeli television. A bunch of Israeli Mossad agents. I want to reiterate, they admitted it on television. I have seen it with my eyes. With all due respect, before you pass a comment that this is speculative or causing trouble or whatever, do the necessary research and you will see, you will find for yourself. Admitted that they were Mossad agents who were there to record the destruction of the Twin Towers. So Israel was either the prime mover behind those attacks, or it was in cahoots with some actor from the USA, CIA, Deep State, NS, who knows, I don't know. Or, at the very least, it had foreknowledge of the attacks and didn't share it, thereby allowing those, 3,000 dead and 6,000 and something wounded, injured, and over 1,000 people who've died since, who have since died of cancer, whose cancer can be directly attributed to the specific particles and materials and what have you that were incinerated on that day. And I put it to you that Janusz Walusz and Clive Derby-Lewis were, according to these people who know a hang of a lot more than I do about these things, were set up. And therefore, I don't think Zuma's daughter, or let's say the Zuma core, I don't think that their issue is that Janusz Walusz has been set free. I mean, the Magoo's bomber, he didn't serve any time. He killed more people than Janusz Walusz did. Who else? There's another example that's not coming to mind freely. And so the list goes on. I don't think it's about the evil white man getting out of jail. I think it's about the last thing we want is this guy, 30 years later, having figured out what really happened, how he was really set up, giving some kind of an inside story. Bear in mind, who was Jacob Zuma at that time? At that time, Jacob Zuma was tantamount to, perhaps not in name, but tantamount to the head of intelligence of the African National Congress. I was told this by a senior diplomat. Maybe I'm saying too much, but yeah, let's leave it there. What else? What next? Cyril Ramaphosa in London, we had more reports of that a couple of days later. Eskom again. Brazilian military. The big things happening in Brazil, guys. We're not suggesting that it's going to be a successful kind of uprising, if that's the right word. They're not making much headway, but hundreds upon hundreds upon hundreds of thousands of people. The videos are just remarkable, have demonstrated in the streets of Brazil this week. The same in Pakistan. in Pakistan, you cannot believe how big those convoys are, and how many hundreds of thousands of people are participating in Imran Khan's so-called long march. The information is just not reaching the mainstream media. It's hardly reaching the peripheral media, the alternative media, the conservative media. But there are big things happening in Brazil and Pakistan in reaction to Lula da Silva, what's his name? Lula, anyway. Apparently cheating the elections, and in reaction to the deposing of Imran Khan as head of the government of Pakistan a few months ago. What else? I think that's about it. Oh, workers want to bring the post office to a standstill. Would we even notice? The Monetary Policy Committee of the South African Reserve Bank raised the repo rate to 7.7% from 6.25%, after it had last raised it from 5.5% to 6.25%, and previous to that 4.75% to 5.5%. So we've had 3 enormous raises in quick succession, and I can tell you that means that there is an enormous threat of strong inflation in South Africa. We had Professor Anton Eberhardt explaining to us with nice diagrams why it is that there is a genuine danger that Eskom will suddenly collapse entirely. He explained with diagrams, with science, with facts and figures. It's not just some kind of allegation, oh, Eskom's going to go down, and then you have somebody in the corner saying, well, it can't just go down altogether all at once. No. When capacity is compromised sufficiently, I can't explain this well, but I can say this. When your capacity is sufficiently compromised, you reach a point at which load shedding or not load shedding, it becomes so frail that even if you're cutting off chunks of the grid, you stand to create a phenomenon in scientific terms where it can just all collapse by itself. And believe, don't believe, but that's what the Big Boffin said, and he didn't just make the claim, he substantiated it very, very nicely with those 2 diagrams and all of the information contained therein. And I think, guys, that we are just about at the end of all that there is to say for the week ending Friday. We forgot the huge Russian attacks on Ukraine. Very briefly, because let's face it, there's been lots of action in the Ukraine war. If we were to focus on every sort of significant event, that's all we would ever do. But day before yesterday, that is to say Wednesday night, apparently 9 or 10 Tu-95, Tupolev 95 heavy strategic bombers, Russian, the ones with the 8 turbine engines, I beg your pardon, 4 turbine engines driving 8 propellers in each. In other words, each engine has 2 propellers in front of it, spinning, counter-rotating to one another. One propeller goes this way, the other propeller goes that way. Anyway, took off with a bunch of KH-101 missiles and Kinzhal missiles, launched them at several key points across Ukraine, many key points. They were complemented by 2 strike craft type vessels on the Caspian Sea. That's an inland sea, about northeast of the Black Sea, but an inland sea, encompassed all about by land, between Russia and Iran, and some vessels in the Black Sea too, and then a whole bunch of drones. The Ukrainians have reported two numbers pertaining to the missiles from the ships and the bombers, excluding the drones, the suicide drones. One report coming out of Ukraine said it was about 100 missiles, of which 67, 68, 69 were shot down. And the other report was that, in fact, there were only 70 or so missiles, of which 51 were shot down. In both cases, that means that roughly 2/3 of the missiles were shot down. 2/3 of the missiles were shot down, and 1/3 of the missiles got through, give or take. The net result is that the third that did get through, that did successfully penetrate the Ukraine's air defense systems, did a huge amount of damage. And it is looking as if Vladimir Putin is stepping on the gas a little bit. The mere fact that 9 or 10 Tu-95, NATO reporting name Bear, Tupolev 95 heavy strategic bombers, as I say, called by NATO Bear, as in grizzly bear, have been deployed at once in one action is phenomenal. Nobody saw that coming. It's a huge number of the most powerful, among the most powerful strategic bombers ever built. And just to launch a whole bunch of them like that, not using them in penny packets or piecemeal, was quite a turn up for the books. Anyway, guys, thank you very much for listening. It has been wonderful to talk to you. We hope that you have a blessed weekend and look forward to seeing you again soon. Thank you. Cheers. Bye-bye.